Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia Lost can be found. In this video, I'll share some gameplay of the new Omega 3 raid battle in a Clawful Caper, while musing over the New Year's events, Hinomoto and lore, and what I think will happen next in this arc. If you're not familiar with the first New Year's event, Fortune from Afar, that raid introduced Ieyasu and his entourage of Shishimai, Addis, Sazanka, and Botan, all of whom hailed from an eastern island country called Hinomoto. In the same way that Taiwu represents China in the world of Dragalia Lost, Hinomoto represents Japan, and many of the traditions Ieyasu and his retainers shared with Prince Yuden and the Halidom were hallmarks of the Japanese New Year. Likewise for Mitsuhide and crew in a Clawful Caper. In that first New Year's event way back in January 2019, and in related adventure and dragon stories, we learned a lot about Hinomoto for the first time, even though it was implied since the game's launch that adventurers like Aoi, Jiroda, Musashi, and Taro were from a land foreign to Alberia. In particular, Ieyasu was the first adventurer to really explain how Hinomoto was ruled and shed light on the relationship between humans and dragons therein. Sazanka, Botan, Chitose, Hanabusa, Addis, and his alt, and other Hinomotoans like Mitsuba all have fine stories, but they're tangential to the overall Hinomotoan plot. Let's start with what we learned from Ieyasu and Fortune from Afar about how Hinomoto is governed. Hinomoto was once a country rife with warring clans, parallel to the Sengoku era in Japanese history. To end the bloodshed, a human offered up their soul to the strongest dragon in all of Hinomoto, Lady Amaterasu. Moved by the human sacrifice, Amaterasu formed a pact with this human to bring peace and unity to the island nation. The human became the country's first shogun, Amaterasu's chosen, and the appointed arbiter of humankind, while Amaterasu governed over dragons and ensured tranquility and prosperity for all. Unlike the Dragon Pacts of Alberia, the pacts formed by Amaterasu and the dragons of Hinomoto were known as soul pacts, and just as the first shogun did, humans who undertook them paid a price for the power and honor of allying with the dragon. Once the pact was formed, their lifespan was shortened. This cost necessitated the presence of multiple successors in case the shogun was to die, and so a system of governance led by the shogun and 12 human clans and Amaterasu and 12 great dragons was formed. These dragons include the Dragon of Battle, Morishi-ten, the Power Most Divine, Daikoku-ten, and the Horse Clan's own Susanoo, but notably exclude Ebisu, who failed to be admitted as a great dragon of Hinomoto when Amaterasu first recruited them, and is instead the raid boss for a Clawful Caper. Only the wyrmclan leaders and the shogun can hold soul pacts, and with this power comes 3 responsibilities: to fight to protect Hinomoto, to govern the country's lands, and to hold festivals honoring Lady Amaterasu. Ieyasu was the first wyrmclan leader we met in Dragalia Lost, and it was that third responsibility that led him and his hangers-on to the Halidom to commemorate the New Year, as ambassadors of Hinomoto seeking to spread hospitality and good fortune. This has basically been the pretense for both New Year's events so far, and although it's never expressly stated, it's very clear that each wyrmclan corresponds to an animal from the zodiac: mouse, ox, tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, horse, sheep, monkey, rooster, dog, and boar. Ieyasu released as the Year of the Boar began, and Mitsuhide followed during the Year of the Rat. Nobunaga, meanwhile, is the leader of the Horse Clan. She accompanied Mitsuhide in a Clawful Caper. Cygames has released Zodiac characters in their other franchises like Grand Blue Fantasy before, in case anyone had any lingering doubts about whether this was a pattern or not in Dragalia Lost. It certainly seems to be, although given Dragalia Lost's own finite lifespan, it makes sense we'd see other wyrmclan leaders released on off years, like Nobunaga, when those Zodiac years won't come around for a while. So, Hinomoto sounds like a nice place, neat history, cool clans, limited adventurers, but what's the rub? Well, the first time we get any real details on any overarching plot afoot in Hinomoto was during a Clawful Caper, specifically the epilogue and Mitsuhide and Nobunaga's adventurer stories. Let's start with Nobunaga's adventurer story, which takes place before New Year's 2020 and explains why she decided to join up with Mitsuhide on her trip to Alberia. In Nobunaga's story, a couple goes missing from a village in Mouse Clan territory, and Mitsuhide and Nobunaga set off to investigate. Daikokuten picks up Amaterasu's scent in the area, and the party ponders why the Great Divine Dragon might have intervened here with no word to the wyrmclan leaders. As Daikokuten bites into a stone pillar that smells of Amaterasu, everyone else in the area disappears except for our main inquisitors. Thinking about the missing couple, Nobunaga and Mitsuhide deduce that it wasn't everyone else who vanished, but rather them along with the couple. It's revealed that the pillar was composed of heavenly gleam shards known in Alberia as otherworld fragments, and that Nobunaga and Mitsuhide were in fact whisked away to an otherworld replica of the real world, empty of people, but full of replenishing food and other amenities and comforts. They meet the missing couple who wants to stay in the other world and prayed to Amaterasu to offer them comfort and prosperity after suffering some setbacks in life. But Nobunaga and Mitsuhide realize that the food and provisions are so plentiful in this otherworld replica of Hinomoto that whatever Lady Amaterasu was staging couldn't just be for this couple alone. Instead, it appeared as though she was setting up and supplying a parallel dimension as a way to safeguard and protect Hinomoto if needed. Our wyrmclan duo notes that heavenly gleam shards are very rare and precious, typically held only by Lady Amaterasu herself and given out to wyrmclan leaders on their trips to foreign lands to entertain the dignitaries of those locales with festivities on the Kagura stage, where our raid battles with Shishimai and Abisu unfolded. The two remark how Hinomoto has a good relationship with its nearest neighbor, Taiwu, but they're uncertain when it comes to other lands, and perhaps this might explain why Amaterasu is preparing some sort of otherworld defense. Ultimately, it's the curiosity behind this question that leads Nobunaga to accompany Mitsuhide on her journey to Alberia, despite the Mouse Clan being assigned there for this year's trip. Nobunaga is characterized by her desire to break with tradition and her hope to unify her country and the world using her power as a wyrmclan leader. Both her name and Mitsuhide's are ancestral in their respective clans, and ironically, the first Mitsuhide betrayed the first Nobunaga, despite the current wyrmclan leaders being close friends. This reflects the true history of Akechi Mitsuhide and Oda Nobunaga during the Sengoku era of Japan. Ieyasu likewise is named after Tokugawa Ieyasu, who unified Japan and ushered in the Edo period. In any case, that's the setup for why Nobunaga accompanies Mitsuhide to Alberia in a Clawful Caper. I won't recap much of the actual events of a Clawful Caper, since they're pretty lighthearted and character-focused, just like with Fortune from Afar and how that raid event explored Ieyasu and Botan's relationship history. But the epilogue is where things get interesting. In it, Mitsuhide and Nobunaga, alone at the New Year, talk now that the cat and mouse chase is over. Nobunaga asks Mitsuhide what she's doing alone, to which she replies, "Oh, just plotting an insurrection." Nobunaga scolds Mitsuhide that her joke isn't funny, to which Mitsuhide says, "But I thought a grain of truth made every joke funnier." This is the first lingering mystery as far as the wyrmclan saga. What does Mitsuhide really mean here? In the past, we know that wyrmclan leaders often competed, sometimes in underhanded ways, for the coveted title of shogun. Could Mitsuhide mean the internal politics of Hinomoto? Does she plan to strike out against Amaterasu somehow and overthrow the entire system? Or does she mean something else? Well, in truth, Mitsuhide always presents herself as somebody relaxed, laid back, and just wanting nothing more than to sleep the day away. But we do get one possible explanation in her adventure story, although I have to admit it's not the most exciting one. In that story, she plays a mischievous social game called Uprising against Yuden. If she wins the Uprising, she gets to take over the Halidom. It's a way for her to test him as a leader and entertain herself. Perhaps at the end of the day, that's all she meant by plotting an insurrection, since that story does take place after a Clawful Caper. But we really don't know. Unfortunately, her conversation with Nobunaga in the epilogue of A Clawful Caper is interrupted by none other than Yuden himself. After some banter and New Year celebrations, though, things get even more interesting. We cut to Hinomoto in a room or palace called the Chamber of Light. Many of the other wyrmclan leaders are assembled in the court of Lady Amaterasu, and a servant addresses the entire group. We see flashes of the wyrmclan leaders' faces, one familiar and 3 others new. Ieyasu is clearly present, but so too is a woman with an eye patch, a young man who bears a striking resemblance to Yuden, and a towering giant figure that looks almost more Roken than human. The woman is probably the easiest to align with Japanese history given her missing eye. I suspect that her name is Masamune, and that she represents the early Edo period tactician Date Masamune, also known as the One-Eyed Dragon, and I think for that reason she probably leads the Dragon Clan. If the towering man is indeed a Roken smith, then he might be named Muramasa after Sengo Muramasa, but I'm not sure what zodiac animal would fit him. Perhaps a snake or serpent, considering Muramasa's reputation of having cursed blades, and Orochi might be a fine dragon partner for him. And finally, that brings us to the young man who resembles Yuden. On this one, I'm really lost, but if there's one person starkly absent from the wyrmclan leaders based on history, it would have to be Toyotomi Hideyoshi. The real Nobunaga was the first great unifier of Japan, Hideyoshi was the second, and Ieyasu was the third. The thing is, the real Hideyoshi was a retainer to Nobunaga before becoming shogun, so in Dragalia Lost terms, that might mean it's more likely Hideyoshi will appear as a member of Nobunaga's horse clan eventually, probably whenever we finally get her dragon, Susanoo. Regardless, the images of these mysterious new wyrmclan leaders are just one part of the epilogue teaser. What's spoken is perhaps even more tantalizing. The servant who addresses the court says, "The whereabouts of Master Seimei of the Ox Clan are unknown." As an aside, I would guess we're looking at a character named after Abe no Seimei here, the famous Japanese onmyoji, astrologer, and mystic who was said to live an incredibly long life and even predates the Sengoku period in Japan. Funny for such a magic-oriented character to lead the stubborn, earthly Ox Clan, but I guess Ieyasu isn't all that boar-like either. In any case, we should learn a lot more about the Ox Clan soon, since 2021 is the year of the Ox. The servant goes on to address the court. If this is a case of foul play, and the party responsible is who I suspect, we may need to prepare ourselves, Lady Amaterasu. And after a second or so passes, the servant follows up, and prepare you for an advent into a world of strife. Unfortunately, I really don't know enough about Japanese history to have any idea who might have a grudge against Seimei or the shogunate as a whole, but this all sounds really exciting to me as far as the future of this story arc. And well, that brings us to the final bit of information we have so far on what's next for Hinomoto and New Year's. In the final chapter of this summer's first facility event, Rhythmic Resolutions, we learned the traveling singer, the marvelous Naoto, wasn't just an amazing vocal talent. He also just so happened to be one of the retainers of Seimei. In the final scene of that event, Naoto reapplies one of his master's talismans meant to protect the town of Quinbell from fiends, a talisman torn down by the dragon Styx. He muses that the situation in Quinbell is resolved, but questions whether Prince Yuden will bear good fortune or bad omens. Then Naoto departs to his master to report back on what has taken place. Combined with Mitsuhide's story, Naoto's musings definitely raise the possibility that Yuden himself is a possible threat to Hinomoto. Even Ieyasu's story, in which he discusses with Yuden what it means to be a good ruler, could be seen as information gathering. And the whole reason Nobunaga joins Mitsuhide on her trip is that she suspects a foreign kingdom might pose a threat to Hinomoto. All signs pointing to Yuden. Alberia houses seers and harbingers of the future like Verica and Zena, so it doesn't seem all that strange to me to think diviners or fortune tellers in Hinomoto might also have some concerns over the future in which Yuden eventually becomes a Dark Emperor. Perhaps the fortune-spreading trips are just a ruse to actually gather information and learn more. That being said, we also really don't know who Amaterasu's servant thought was responsible for Seimei being missing. It seems unlikely to be Yuden, and based on what Naoto says, it feels more like Seimei is roaming or absent of their own volition rather than as a consequence of some external reason or factor. considering none of the events in the campaign so far have prompted Hinomoto to intervene in world affairs, including the rise and fall of Musayari, the Diurnal Empire, and the recent emergence of the Agito Uprising. Whoever this mysterious fomenter of strife is, must be one formidable foe indeed. I suppose we'll just have to wait until New Year's 2021 to learn more, barring some other surprise event between now and then. Anyway, y'all, that's where things stand with the New Year's Hinomoto story arc, Amaterasu, and how I feel about it all. Take care, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.